You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. If you were the storyteller but not the story, what would you choose to create in this very moment? Explore this fascinating perspective with me in today's episode. This episode contains strong language and listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer. What if everything we've been told about holistic health, healing, and well-being is only part of the story? Because thriving in today's world looks different than it used to. Here, we challenge the narratives, rethink what it means to become human, and explore how that shapes the way we lead, live, and step into our full potential. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. We all carry stories that shape who we believe we are, what we allow ourselves to want, and how much of our truth we are willing to share. At some point, the question becomes whether the story still belongs to us or whether we have been living inside a version that was handed to us. Celinne Da Costa is an executive coach and advisor who works with Fortune 150 executives, established entrepreneurs, and thought leaders navigating the gap between the success they've built and the leadership their next chapter demands. She specializes in the sharp skills most development programs skip: discernment, intuitive leadership, and the ability to articulate who you are with clarity and weight. Her work sits at the intersection of identity transformation and strategic storytelling, helping clients dissolve the internal patterns that cap their effectiveness, and then translate that transformation into how they communicate, lead, and influence. Her work has been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, and Business Insider, and she has delivered a TEDx talk on the power of human connection. Let's meet Celinne Da Costa. Before we begin today's episode, we have a special invitation for you. There's a growing shift in how we understand the ways we live, lead, create, and relate. Many of us are starting to see how everything is interconnected, from health and well-being to leadership, relationships, creating wealth, and our purpose and alignment. What would it take to thrive in this world and step into your next evolution? We are bringing together over 60 speakers across holistic well-being, including mind, body, emotions, energy, human potential, wealth, leadership, relationships, and more, to explore what multidimensional well-being looks like. And you can be part of many exciting live events hosted during the Holistic Wellbeing Summit from June 8th to 14th. Get your free ticket now at holisticwellbeingsummit.com. And now, back to today's episode. Hi, Celinne. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because we will be talking about our stories today, our true stories, our courage and the clarity and the discernment to tell our stories and everything around that. And isn't that such an important part of our lives, stories and identity? So glad that you are here today to join me. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm super looking forward to diving in.
Yeah, I feel it's an important part of our lives is what we tell for stories and how we tell them and what we talk about. So I'm very curious about your own story. If maybe for starters, you want to share a little bit about your journey or your story and the parts of it that you feel relate to what you do today, and also share with our listeners what it is that you do today.
I love your question because it's a very meta question. We're about to talk story and then you're asking me to tell my story. And I will share with you. But before I do, it's what I loved about your question is my story as it relates to what we're here to talk about today, which in and of itself is what we're going to talk about today, which is how to actually choose the story that you're going to share in what moment. And so when I tune into this moment, and I tune into this conversation, the story that I'm compelled to share from my life is how I got to be somebody who tells stories. And it really kicked off in 2016 when I was an Italian immigrant working in New York City. I had worked very hard to get into corporate. I was a strategist at an advertising agency. And I had done everything that was told of me to do. I worked very hard. I got great grades. I got into a very well-known advertising agency in New York City. And I was working there my 12-hour days, working my little butt off so I could have a promotion, so I could be someone, so I could be significant. And all the stories that I told myself about that. And long story made short, a few years into this hamster wheel, I hit a breaking point, and we could call it a breaking point, or we could call it the grace of God, source, universe intervening, where I realized I can't do this. I cannot live this life. It's not the life for me. And if I continue going, there's a part of me that's going to die, and I'm not willing to let that part of me die. But that decision, that internal decision, was very confusing to the mind, because I had worked so hard. I have done so much. Everything looked good on the outside. I had checked all the boxes. So what could possibly be wrong with me? That was the story. And this intuition, it led me on a very big adventure where ultimately I decided that I was going to quit my job. I was going to leave everything behind. And I was going to do a social experiment where I challenged myself to circumnavigate the globe by couch surfing without the app and without the website. That means no Airbnb app, no couch surfing app, just the power of human connection. I wanted to, there's many things I wanted, and I wasn't able to really connect the dots until hindsight. But what I see in myself now is that unknowingly, I had a hunger to first trust in humanity again, and by extension, to trust myself again. I had a hunger to actually have a lived experience of human connection and what it means to be a human in the world, having a dream, what it means to be supported by other humans in the world. And I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could go out and fetch my life purpose, or more accurately, if it could find me. And so I went on an epic adventure where for over the course of 9 months, I slept in the homes of over 70 people, most of them strangers, in 18 countries. I literally wrote a book about it, which is coming out in a month. And I shared the story of what I found on the other side, which is why we're having a conversation today. One of the biggest insights that I found from interviewing hundreds of people around the world about the human condition and having my own lived experience of sleeping in the homes of all kinds of strangers, from people, villagers who had very little to their name, to top executives and penthouses and everything in between, across, I don't even know off the top, like 5 different continents. What I realized is that every single person in the world has a story to tell. And the way you choose to tell that story, the meaning you assign to that story, is going to transform the trajectory of your life. And so I became very fascinated with this insight that I kept seeing over and over again. And again, by the grace of God, I built a brand, I built a career, I built my vocation around helping people not only find and remember that story, but to actually remember the story of their mission and the life that they're here to live, and not the life that they've been conditioned into. So helping people breaking those chains and create a story that is medicine for others is my jam.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And wow, I can probably hear some listeners gasping if they think of their children circumnavigating the globe, sleeping on various couches of strangers. But I would imagine that this brought something into your life, that whole journey, that completely changed the story that you were telling before you took that trip, and the story that developed after you took that trip. By what you have shared, it sounds like this was an absolutely impactful and life-changing journey that you embarked on. And I would love to know a little bit more about also maybe what you were feeling and experiencing as you were undertaking this journey. So very often we are stuck in our stories. And as you said in the beginning, we're stuck in lives that maybe we didn't design and don't even love. As you were coming out of that story that you were stuck in and into something completely different, how did you experience that on this actual journey that you took around the world?
It's such a good question, because how did I experience that? I keep bringing it back, but it literally is the book I've just written. And I have been journeying with this journey for the last 10 years. And only now that this literal physical thing I've written about that story, about that time in my life, is coming out into the world, do I feel like the chapter closed, which is in and of itself such a lesson. And this is something that when I'm working with my clients and they're trying to make sense of some of the stories that they've lived, some of the chapters that they've closed, whether it looks like a divorce, whether it looks like a really big job change, a location change, a really big life transition that happened in their lives, and they're still trying to say, how do I write a book about this? Or how do I make sense of this, right? This is something that I talk about in my teachings, which is there are your metabolized stories, and then there's the stories that you're still metabolizing, right? There is the stories where you're like, I'm complete. This is ready to be given to the world, and I can let it go now because it's no longer my story. It's the story of the collective unconscious, right? It's the story of all of us. And then there's the stories that we are still elaborating on a personal level. And so for me, that incredible, crazy adventure set off a chain of events in my life that I continued to journey with for the last decade. And there's several different chains of events that this set off, too many to share here. But the ones that, again, are relevant to this conversation are this notion that it's actually all story. Everything is story, all of it. And it's such a big thing that has taken me years to wrap my head around. And the more I sit with it and the more I surrender to it, the more it makes sense while not making sense at all, if that makes sense. It is this deep, okay, every single thing that I know about my life and about who I am on an identity level is a story I have either chosen, either consciously or unconsciously, to tell myself. And so if we're not the story, but we are the storyteller, it starts to open up a very interesting way to relate to life. Because it's less about me telling you a story about my past and about my life, which I can do many times. And it's more about what is it that I want to create in this moment right now, and what story would best serve that. Because when I tell the story, it's going to supercharge this moment and the meaning that you and I give to this moment. This goes back to that notion that I share, that as I was hearing people around the world, one of the things I used to joke about when I got off of my trip, obviously I had so many questions. People asked me so much. And one of the things was like, what do people have in common across all of these countries and continents and socioeconomic statuses? And I used to make a joke, and I was like, they all complain about their bills. And I thought that to be so funny, the way that the penthouse executive would complain about his bills, and so would the villager who was getting by on minimum wage. What's going on? And this set me off on a deeper inquiry of, they're complaining about it because they perceive the story they're telling themselves is that they don't have enough, that there isn't enough. And it set me on this scavenger hunt to really see all the levels of stories that we have, which is the personal narrative, which is the story of me that I can tell you about me being born and my lived experiences and the parents that I grew up with and the things that I've done. And then there's the stories of our ancestors, which is the ones that you've inherited, about what money means, what relationships mean, what work means. We hear ancestral stories. You ever heard the stereotype of the Asian family that makes their kid go to school because they're a doctor, right? So they can be a doctor or a lawyer. We've heard this story many times. It's not every family, but there's a collective truth in that. There's ancestral, there's cultural truths and stories that we tell. And then there's a collective story of humanity. But it's all stories. And we get to choose how we tell them. I'll pause there. There's more here, but I would love to hear from you. We're getting very meta.
It just gets me thinking. All sorts of wheels are turning as you're sharing this, because the biggest thing that I'm hearing that you were sharing is that we actually are empowered to change our story at any point if we like to, because everything is story. We have the power and the choice to change those stories. And yes, there may be some collective stories, also some family or cultural stories that are very ingrained and that we have taken on for various reasons. But there are also our personal stories that we have the choice over to change. And it often doesn't feel like that when we are in our lives and complaining about bills and whatever else is going on. It often doesn't feel like we can change the story. And what you have shared is so empowering on that level. Think about that. Just take a step back and think about that. If everything is story, we are in charge of telling that in whichever way we choose to, at whichever point we choose to. This is just mind-blowing to me, because so often we assume we can't. We have no choice, no power over any of that. And what you have experienced, what you are living, what you're sharing with your clients is the exact opposite of that. And that, I feel, if anything now, if listeners want to go back through this podcast after, really take that part in, I feel that in itself is already a life-changing insight that you have given.
Thank you. And I want to make this very practical as well as we're speaking, because as what I'm sharing is more in the energetic realms. It's how do we actually shift our perception of reality and how we relate to story, right? Because that in itself is already going to change how we tell that story. But I want to make this even more tangible and practical, right? Because one of the reasons that many people, they come to me is they're on the verge of writing a book. It's very common. They're very stuck. They're writing a book. I have a client, 17 years I've been trying to write a book. 20 years I've been trying to write a book. They're like 10 years. And the same as in, I'm trying to tell my story. I'm trying to pick up my Instagram stories and say something about me. I'm trying to actually communicate with the world what my story is, and they're getting completely blocked. Have you had that feeling of, I want to share it, but I can't, because if I do, people are going to judge me, or this can look really bad for me. I don't know how to do this, right? And I can speak, I've helped a lot of clients do this, but I can speak from my own lived visceral experience of going through this initiation myself, which is, there's many different books I could have written when it comes to The Burning Ground, which is the name of my book. But the reason why it took me 10 years to write the book I wrote is because it was very important to me that the story I told would be a clean transmission and an offering to the world that had less of me and more of soul and what it is that I wanted to contribute to the collective. When you think about the original storytellers, the ones who we used to, there was a time where we didn't have writing, where there's still, to this day, cultures that don't have manuscripts. They have oral tradition. They have stories that are told through time for years and years. And those storytellers, there was literally a role in the tribe. There's a doctor, there's the carpenter, there is the storyteller. And the job of the storyteller was to pass on the culture, the lessons, the truth of that tribe onto generations. And when the storyteller sat around the fire and told his or her story, it wasn't so that he or she could feel validated in her experience. Okay, you got to hear about what happened to me today. So I was going for the chickens and Joe, he took a chicken from me. Can you believe he did that? How rude of that is it, right? So you can so everyone's, he's so rude. I know, you should have totally. And that's where we start going into what we see on social media these days, right? The validation, the consistent perpetuation of someone's disempowering narrative so that they can feel seen and validated in their experience because they haven't processed it yet, et cetera, et cetera. That was not the job of the storyteller. The job of the storyteller was to transmit truths from the collective, from our experience of humanity into others, so that we could have a social contract where we could agree on certain things and values, what it means to be integral, what it means to be virtuous, what it means to be kind, right? So we can be human and human with each other harmoniously and peacefully. That's the original template of the storyteller. So when we superimpose it into modern day, at least the way I see it, when we're writing a book, when we're doing a speech, when we're writing on social media, when we're creating an article, whatever it is that we're creating to the world, there's a deeper inquiry of what is the story that we're telling and what is actually the service that the story is doing. And so for myself, I can tell you that I had to do a lot of healing work. I had to do a lot of emotional processing. And I had to really sit with some of the things that I talk about in this book and ask myself the deeper question of, am I sharing the story so I can be validated in my experience and be seen in my expression? Or am I sharing the story because I have something I want to offer to the world that is of value? And that is the way that I see it, is the story is the vessel. It's like I'm on a boat and you get on the boat with me and I take you on a journey. And through my journey, through the eyes of my journey, you have your own experience of your own story. And I just wasn't able to do that until I wasn't able to publish this until actually that was the case. And I felt the resonance in my body that this was a clean transmission. This was a clean well that people could drink from. Now, is it a clean well that people can drink from? As far as I know, I'm sure maybe someone can read and be like, oh, there's a distortion right there. There's a moment that she hasn't 100% processed, maybe. But as far as I know, and my publisher knows, and my editors know, we're good. And so a lot of times people get stuck and they don't know how to tell their story. And they think it's because they don't have the right words. And they think it's because they just haven't figured out the right way to say it to the world. But actually, what tends to be the truth, it's because they haven't metabolized. In other words, to say that is emotionally processed. I even felt that as I said that in the collective. They haven't emotionally processed yet the thing that they want to share. And they're still carrying a lot of fears that are from the ego structure of, oh my God, people are going to judge me. I'm not going to be like, they're going to see me in this and they're going to think this much of that. And all of those fears that you may be carrying around telling your story is a telltale sign that it's not yet metabolized for the collective. It's the signpost. If you're like, I don't know how to tell my story. What are you afraid of? Why are you not telling it? We start there. That's the first question I ask my clients. And okay, let's clean that up, because when it's ready to go, it's for the collective. And there's no problem in telling that story. The same way that storyteller is sitting around the fire. He's not sitting there, oh my God, what will people think about me? He's sitting there, I'm going to tell a story, and I'm going to allow this story to move through me, because the telling of the story is in service to the people who are in front of me. So let me open my mouth. Let me connect to that place underneath the words, and let me speak and tell a story. And of course, there's all these strategies and tools and techniques that I teach as well in my courses of how to structure a story, beginning, middle, and end, like how to give it structure so that people stay compelled, they stay with you. There's a lot of technique and skill set that can be learned around storytelling. Ultimately, at the end of the day, to me, it's really about preserving the sacred geometry of why a story is being told in the first place, which is to serve the audience and to remind them of something that they've forgotten so that they can remember who they really are and who they're here to be. And we can do that with one social media post if the transmission is clean.
Wow. Yeah, I feel you're touching on something really profound here, and something that we often overlook when we are transmitting out into the world. Is very often just about us, our experiences, and, oh, but I need to be right. I need to be validated in this. I need to be heard and seen in this. And not so much about how this ripples out into the world and what we're contributing or not contributing at that point. So that's really fascinating perspective. And I'm very curious about how you worked with that, because you shared that it took you 10 years to write this book. How did you go about processing the things that you needed to process to come to a point where you could write this book, where you could actually put this out into the world? And maybe even how do you work with your clients on that if they have this journey still ahead of them where they feel they're not ready? and they don't have the words. How do you work with them on processing some of these things so they come to this place of where they can share?
Yeah. So I was speaking to a student the other day about this who's having a similar, I've been wanting to write a book, but I'm currently in my business and I need to, the next 3 years, I need to focus on really focusing on putting money aside with everything that's happening with the economy and blah. And then maybe I'm going to start working on my book and my brand and putting my message out to the world. And I bring her up because your question really connects to that. And it connects to one of the greatest fallacies that I see people do, which is pushing their brand, their personal brand, and they're telling their story over there. And there's another really seductive trap is when I have done the work. And a seductive trap is I'm listening to this podcast and it's Celinne's telling me like, oh, I need to metabolize my story. I haven't metabolized my story. I have definitely got lots of healing to do. So therefore I can't tell my story and I need to go off on this healing journey before I can even start to tell my story. I just want to debunk that because that's not what I'm saying. And it's not what I'm insinuating. And so if that's the journey you're going to go on, just know it is a distraction. But it's more about, for example, with my book, it's not like I waited 10 years and then I sat down and I wrote 300 pages. I wrote it and I got stuck. And I asked myself why. And instead of forcing myself to write it because I should, because it's been whatever many years that I haven't finished it, I attempted to figure out why I was getting stuck in that specific place, which then had me find the right mentor who helped me understand what was the story underneath the story. Because if I really double click on, okay, and then what did I do? The laundry list is very long and boring. And I'll be honest. It's very long and boring and unsexy, like breath work. I did breath work. I became a breath worker. I did a lot of hypnotherapy. It changed my life. I became a hypnotherapist, like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, healers, plant medicine, coaches, people who would spot me and really help me like thoroughly get on my knees and fucking scrub this, clean this up. It was grueling sometimes. It was incredibly uncomfortable. I didn't want to look at the truth. I didn't enjoy editing all those chapters that I wrote a couple of years ago, realizing that I needed to write all of that stuff because I actually needed to express my pain. And someone does not need to read 90% of that thing I wrote. It was for me. It wasn't for them. The discipline, the discernment, it took a lot, but I think what I'm getting to at is that I became the quest of sharing my story with the world in a way that was aligned to my mission instead of my trauma was a quest that forged me into the woman that I am today. It was a quest that I said yes to and that I took on. And I showed up very imperfectly. I started building my personal brand. I started posting on social media. Some of them were viral because of I expressed myself rawly and people related to that. Some of them were not clean transmissions. Some of them were so fucking crystal clear. Those were usually the ones that had somebody knocking on my door, applying to work with me. Okay. But over the years, I built a body of work. Over the years, I showed up again and again, authentically. Authentically does not mean perfectly. It definitely does not mean pristine. And it doesn't mean that I look back on it and I'm like, God, I'm really glad I posted that on the internet. Lots of cringe moments, lots of ick, and also lots of wow. That's me. I did that. I wrote that. Seeing my name, seeing myself featured on Forbes, seeing my story featured on Business Insider, and being invited to podcasts. I'm like, okay, clearly what I'm saying is like somewhat resonating. So let me keep doing that, more of that, and less of the thing that isn't really working out. And I don't feel good. And I feel like a really terrible vulnerability hangover afterwards. And so it was a pivot and adjust, pivot, refine, adjust, pivot, refine, adjust. And I think this is honestly, between you and me and whoever's listening, this is what a lot of people don't want to hear. Because we live in a culture of just immediate satisfaction, right? And again, I have friends who channeled books in 60 days and like they had a full manuscript in 60 days because they were so in the zone and they had the time in their schedule. There is absolutely no freaking, I'm not saying like it needs to take you 10 years for you to actually channel a proper book. That is literally not what I'm saying. But I have seen people push a book out because they think they should write it. I have seen people like force themselves to write a thing and hire copywriters and hire strategists. Like I have been hired by those people and I've had to tell them, I'm not doing this. This is not how, like, I help you tell your story. It's not by rushing it. It's not by trying to push it out like it's something that needs to be structured and packaged into a thing that needs to be sold now. That's just not, again, this is my passion coming through, right? There's so many different ways to do so many different things. I just haven't seen something that lasts over the years and is remembered over the years not be a transmission. I haven't seen, think about the classics. Think about the pieces, the books, the music that just spans through time and space, and the chord that this hits in the collective. If I am to align myself to that kind of storytelling, I need to do better. I need to show up in a different way. And it's not any different than if you and I were having a business conversation and we were speaking about what does it look like to create a 7-figure business. And it's like, you can do that. But there's one way to do it where you feel fulfilled and happy. And then there's another way to do it where you're incredibly burnt out, exhausted, and resenting your life. I feel the same way about story. I feel the same way about the books we create, the art that we put out into the world. We can push out a story and it might resonate and it might trauma bond with a whole lot of people. But is that who you want to be? Personally, it's not who I want to be. It's not the woman I'm becoming and have become. I know it's a bit controversial. I have I have a sacred reverence for the art of storytelling, and I'm unwilling to dilute that reverence. And anytime I'm straying from that, my compass is that storyteller sitting by the fire and the sacred geometry that the archetype holds, that I believe we can all learn from.
Yeah, beautifully said. And there's something about authenticity and alignment, and when we actually share from that versus a different place that we come from when we are still in the wound of everything. And I think it connects with people on a very different level when you tell your story in the way that you've described.
Yeah. And it's just to land the plane on that, because I realized I didn't complete the loop, but it's a frequency shift. It's not let's do 10 years of me let me know what I said to that student. It's not about you working your ass off for 3 years so you have the space to create a personal brand later. It's about you actually entering the frequency of contribution and abundance, like now, and continue to retrain your nervous system to be sharing story and to be creating your personal brand from that frequency. And when you get started, it might be like 2% that frequency. But if you keep authentically showing up with that commitment in your heart, it's like 10%, 50%. And then when you post 10 social media posts and 8 out of 10 have that frequency, you're already going to start to see a shift in the way that people relate to you and perceive you. And your quote unquote brand is going to start informing others and yourself, and your commitment to shifting that frequency is going to start creating a different field around your brand that is then going to become quite magnetic. And you will eventually publish that book and write that speech and get on that TEDx, but it's going to feel differently when you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And how does that feel differently for you today, looking back now that you have told your story and the book is coming out, I think as this episode airs even. When you look back, how does that feel different now that the story has been birthed out into the world and it's there for everyone to read? Do you experience anything different on a personal level, energetic level, mentally, emotionally? How does that feel today?
I'm holding my book in my hands now, and first words that come to mind is, I feel like I did a great job. And it sounds like such a silly thing to say, but for a high achiever who has spent her entire life striving, proving, look at what I can do. And I have a whole list of accolades. I have a TED Talk, and I have the Forbes article. I have lots of things, hundreds of podcasts that I've been on, tens of thousands of followers or audience members. I have achieved so much in my life, and it didn't feel like enough. It never felt like enough. And I remember I used to have this, okay, next. Okay, great. TEDx. Okay, next one. Next thing. Okay, great. Oh, cool. I did this much. Finally, I hit this new milestone in monthly revenue. Great. Okay, what's the next one? What's next? And one of the greatest things that this book has taught me And anyone who reads this book, you're going to receive everything I've said through story form and more. One of the greatest things that this book has taught me is let it be enough. Let this chapter fill you with grace and gratitude and lessons. And when I look at this, I'm like, I did a great job. This is enough. I did great. And that feeling in my body is somewhat unfamiliar. It's actually a feeling that I'm growing into and I'm leaning into, which is being in the satisfaction and the grandiosity and the effort and the challenge and the beauty and the contribution of what I did, and just being present in that until I've sucked all the nutrients out of this moment. And then I can move on when it just becomes dust because it's so integrated and metabolized into my system. Not to be confused with numb, not to be confused with I don't feel it because I numb it out, which is what happens. I work with very high level leaders doing incredible things in the world, and they've done so much and they don't feel it, but it's not because they've metabolized the story. It's because they numbed themselves to the thing they've created, and they're busy looking at what's next, playing the stories of what's not enough. So I'm currently in that space of I put something out into the world, and it is truly hand in my heart, as good as it could be in my current level of consciousness. I have 100% given it my all. It's an amazing contribution. It's going to touch the lives of who it touches. And I did a great job. And I can rest in that.
Yeah, I feel that if listeners want to tell their stories and be this as a book, or be this just even speaking to others, or post anything that they want to do, I feel there's a certain level of peace that comes when you actually have told your story, or the story of that moment of who you are, and it comes across in that really aligned and authentic way that you've described. There is a peace that comes with that, and a feeling of maybe finally being enough in some kind of way when we haven't felt that before. And I can relate to that. So thank you for sharing that. And tell us a little bit about how our listeners can connect with you, because I feel this may have really gotten a lot of listeners curious now. Maybe they want to tell their own stories, or even find out why they can't tell their stories. How can listeners connect with you? Where can they find your book? And what kind of programs and services do you offer where they can get in touch and maybe do some of this work with you?
Yeah, of course. Let's take it one step at a time. First is how can they find me? My website, CelineDaCosta.com, CELINNE, that's two N's, DACOSTA. There's multiple ways to work with me. First is privately. This is not for everybody, but you can just go ahead and reach out directly with me there if you do have a book that you're on the verge of launching, if you are feeling incredibly stuck with your story. I do take a select few. And for those for who it's not and are wanting to go deeper with me, I have a group program called Articulate, which is all about how to discover and remember the truth of your story and how to articulate your transmission to the world in a way that is aligned to your mission and contribution. So if you've been looking to find the words to share your mission, I do have an incredibly intimate container where you can do that with me in a group setting. This one's actually not on my website, so you're going to have to, it's invite only. So you're going to have to directly message me for this one. And for those of you who are like, wow, I really want to learn storytelling, but I want to just put my feet in the water. School of Story is a digital course that is also on my website. And School of Story is going to give you, it's level 1, all of the basics of storytelling and telling your brand, sharing your brand story with the world. There's also a free masterclass called Story for Storytelling, which you can find on my website. So that is the different levels through which you can work with me. If you would like to follow me, I would recommend you do that on Substack. But I am on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. It's Celinne Da Costa. But Substack is where I'm most active at the moment. And last but not least, my book The Burning Ground, One Woman's Journey to Reclaim Her Soul and Ignite Her Inner Fire. This beauty is coming out on May 26th, which I believe is the day after, or it's right around when this podcast is dropping. And there are some very exciting things that happen when you order this book right away. You will get, in addition to a physical copy of my book, you will also receive quite a few bonuses that include a guided meditation on how to reconnect to soul, a reader's companion guide. You will get immediate access to the first chapter. There's a book of quotes. So I highly recommend that you go and grab your copy or multiple copies right away, because there's different tiers of bonuses and different ways that you can work with me for a limited time only. That is only exclusive to this book launch. Yeah, I would say you do that. And the website is theburningground.com. That's where you can find my book.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing those resources. And Celinne also has her own podcast called It's Not What You Think. So you can pop over there and listen to some of her episodes there, listen in from your favorite podcast provider. And we, of course, will be linking to all the offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there on how you can find the different levels of working with Celinne and also where you can find her book. And don't let the bonuses get away. I love book launches because there's almost so much great stuff that comes out when we launch books. So highly recommend that. And thanks for putting all of that together and sharing that with the world. I feel that so many people are stuck in their stories, and actually being able to tell them and bring that out, it brings a form of healing with it and that whole journey as well as we continue with that. So yeah, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing this space with me, for sharing your wisdom with all of us. I truly appreciate it. And thanks for spending this time with me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was my absolute pleasure. And thanks everyone for listening in today. Take care of yourselves and be well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.